Always a delight to talk with Scott Chantler. Scott, thank you for joining and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Of course, of course. Good to see you as well. I know we talked, I think it was somewhere around last summer. The Orson Welles poster is still a fixture, which I love.
Oh,
And
that's
we were
right. There
talking,
you go.
yeah, yeah. We were talking about your work with First Second and that world of Knight and Squire and some of those things. But I know on this episode we're talking about a series of yours, Three Thieves. So very excited to be engaging in that. There it
There
is.
it is. That's book
Mm-hmm.
one anyway. Book two is coming out the 24th of June, very soon.
Very soon.
I'm not sure when this podcast will go out, but it will be even sooner by that point.
That's right. The Sign of the Black Rock is the title of
That's the
that
one. I
one.
don't even have a copy yet to show you, but
It's that new.
exactly. I'm expecting some contributor copies to show up any moment.
Now there is also, is there a volume three on the way as well? Somewhere
There
around
are
October.
there are 7 volumes on the way, various
Yeah.
times. Um, Book three comes out, I want to say October.
Hmm.
Don't quote me
Hmm.
on that. It might be November, but October sounds right. I've
Yeah,
kind of lost
that's
track a little bit because, like I said, there's a lot of books and there's slotting them in, and but it's very exciting. It's good to have these books back out into the world.
yeah, that's the Captive Prince, is that right?
Captive Prince is book three. Maybe we'll
Gotcha,
talk again
gotcha.
then. You know,
Yeah, of course.
we'll
You,
just
you
we'll
are
just keep
welcome back
yeah
anytime.
we'll just keep doing this every few months.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can't think of anything I'd rather do, and I absolutely agree with your mug. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, see? My boys got me this for Christmas because
There it is.
I'm always pushing this message.
Yeah, it's a good one. It is a good
Yeah,
one.
man.
If I'm a listener out there, a reader, or on my way to being a reader, which everybody should be, what should the uninitiated know about this series, Three Thieves?
Well, the three thieves are Dessa and Topper and oh, I went the wrong way because I'm looking in a mirror and Fisk, who are circus performers who in this first book, Tower of Treasure, get caught robbing the Queen's treasury. Spoilers. And they escape
Mm-hmm.
and they are going to spend the rest of the series on their uh, kind of on the road, running away from the Queen's best handpicked knights who are on the road, trying to bring them back to to be prisoners again and to face their sentence. And so it's a lot of running and escaping from things and all that stuff. It's kind of loosely based on the old TV show The Fugitive. Some people might
Uh-huh.
also know the movie version from the early 90s, but I really, when it came time to do this fantasy series, which I started writing for my own kids way back in the day, the same kids who bought me this mug. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I wanted something really physical, really just kind of rambunctious, that kids would dig. And there's something inherently dramatic about, a chase, right? So, that's my quick, 1 or 2 minute pitch for the Three Thieves books. It's basically The Fugitive meets The Lord of the Rings.
Nice, nice. And I love that you crafted it for your children first. That's a very cool way in.
When my older son, who just turned 22, actually just graduated from college last week, when he was,
Congratulations.
thank you. When he was, yeah, no more than 3 or 4 years old, asked if I could write a story with a castle in it. And that became this 7 book series that I ended up doing. And referring to the first book here again, you'll see that the third page is a splash page of a castle. And so
Mm-hmm,
I
hmm.
I got his one requirement in pretty much right off the bat, and then did whatever I wanted for another 7 books. But the books are dedicated to them. The new versions are dedicated to both my boys, Miles and Mason. Where are they? There, right there, right there. Dedicated to Miles and
Love
Mason.
it.
There. They're good boys.
Nice.
Good men now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a foundation in storytelling, right? Like all the morals, the ideas that stories carry.
Yeah, you know, I never, to that point in my career, I had not thought of myself as a children's cartoonist. I definitely had intended to do, you know, more adult stuff. But yeah, you know, you get these little kids in your life and you're kind of telling them stories anyway. You know, you're
Mhm.
reading them bedtime stories and just making stuff up, you know, as you do when you're a parent being asked a bunch of questions. Yeah, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world for my career at that point, and I'm glad I did it.
Well, now, I was going to ask kind of a genre-centered question about what draws you to fantasy, what fantasy allows you to do. When your son said, "Draw me a castle, tell me a story with a castle," um, was that an instant, yes, I finally get to do this, or what was your relationship with fantasy like?
Well, it's interesting. Like you know, like most kids, went through a phase where, you know, I wanted all the knights and castles and stuff I could get, and it was a big, you know, when I was a kid, like, you know, Star Wars had just rolled out, and like fantasy
Mhm.
was big, you know, like Conan the Barbarian was big in comics. I liked a DC comic called The Warlord, which you may remember as like
Yeah.
Mike Grell. He was a cool character who had like a sword and a gun. Just, you know,
Mhm.
what 10-year-old boy could resist? Yeah, so I loved a lot of that kind of stuff. You know, when I started reading prose, like my first prose books that I had read were like, you know, Terry Brooks's Shannara books, the early books, like Sword of Shannara and Elfstones of Shannara. And so, yeah, like a lot of people, I kind of grew up with it and loved it. And like I say, grew up at a time where there was a lot of cool stuff rolling out. I kind of put it aside a bit as an adult. Like, truth be told, I don't really love a lot of fantasy genre stuff anymore. You know, some of it's like a lot of it's pretty hacky and I feel like a lot of fantasy authors learned the wrong lessons from Tolkien. Like
Uh-huh.
they went kind of way down a rabbit hole of world building and got lost in it. And you know, you forgot that Lord of the Rings is also about big ideas like, you know, war and industrialization and, you know, all these things that Tolkien was talking about through the lens of, you know, myth and all that stuff, which he was also an expert in. And yeah, so yeah, like I personally don't love a lot of fantasy books as an adult. And it's weird that I've ended up writing so many of them. But I think often sort of the impetus for things you write are things where you see something and you're like, I could do that better, you know?
Mhm.
So, you know, I'm kind of writing these fantasy books for my boys the kind of way I wish more fantasy books were in terms of being, you know, very kind of story and theme driven, also a little more whimsical than a lot of fantasy books are. A lot of fantasy books take themselves very, very seriously. And you know, that's fine to an extent, but you know, to bring it back to Tolkien, I mean, even Lord of the Rings, which is about big ideas, you know, is also very whimsical in places, you know, where it's appropriate, you know,
Mhm.
as a you know, it's the light versus the darkness. And yeah, so like a bit of both. Like I grew up loving fantasy, kind of fell off it a little bit, but then, like I say, started writing these books that were like, well, if I don't see the books I want out there, I'll just make them, which you know is sometimes the way it goes, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned that it's a rambunctious series, so I'm wondering how you keep those stakes going and how you envision the conflicts down the road.
Yeah, like I think it's important to kind of start. Like so many people want to start their stories up here.
Mhm.
And like I think it's important if you want to keep raising the stakes, and that's just good storytelling, you know, to just to start down here. You know? Yeah, like the first Three Thieves book, which I keep referring back to, starts when the circus performers see a person in the crowd that they think they recognize. And, things kind of snowball from there. It turns out to not be the person they thought it was, but then later in the story, they do meet that person and it's a bit of a twist and a surprise. And yeah, I think it's important to not get ahead of yourself, to build to the big payoffs. And
Hmm.
that's when they pay off, right? Like I really enjoy like the Marvel movies up to and including Endgame. And
Hmm.
people are still talking about that, Endgame payoff. And it is great. Like, that movie pays off so spectacularly. But it's because of the 24 movies leading up to it, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly how meticulously it was planned, but it was clearly planned to a certain degree, to lead us there. And each movie kind of builds, and there's stakes, and there's always big climaxes and stuff. But they really earned that payoff. And
Hmm.
I think people dump on those movies all the time because they're popular and they're corporate, and it's easy to do. But yeah, I don't think they'd have held the audience all that time if they couldn't have kept building and building and building and building and then paid off in such a big way. And some of the Marvel movies since then, I was really hoping after Endgame that they would kind of start small again and
Hmm.
build again. But no, they just wanted to kind of stay up there. And I think that's why some of the kind of post Endgame Marvel movies haven't worked as well, is because they're all dialed up here, right? It's
Yeah.
my two cents on the Marvel movies anyway.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Now, speaking also of that kind of series storytelling, as you were envisioning and have envisioned this epic storyline, what has that been like to get to unfold a story that way?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Back in the day when I was first writing these, the original series editor, after we had done this first book, she like we knew it was going to be a series, and she very wisely had me like do a rough plan for the series, like just quick, short springboard plot for each book, and
Hmm.
and we sort of talked about it. So yeah, I essentially pitched her books 2 through 7 at once, and we discussed the series as a whole before I wrote book 2. And it was, they weren't detailed plans for each book. Like there was still lots of room in there for new ideas and for me to improvise and discover things as I wrote. But there was definitely like a, 3 sentence springboard for each of the books that was like a beginning, middle, end, act one, act two, act three, for each of the 7 books. And that turned out to be really valuable. Yeah, I don't feel like people can decide for themselves as the books roll back out there, but I never felt like the series kind of went off the rails. Like it meanders to an extent because the characters themselves are meandering across the world. But I always knew, each time I sat down to write each book, where they would need to be by the end of that book in order
Hmm.
to tee up the next one. So yeah, it's a kind of a nice mix of planning and improvisation, which really is my writing process to begin with. Doesn't matter what I'm writing, whether it's 8 pages or 800 pages. I will kind of plan just enough. I'll outline about halfway, and then that's enough of a springboard to kind of dive into the pool. That's yeah, that's it's how I do it anyway. I know some writers are meticulous planners, and some are determined seat of their pantsers. But
Hmm.
I'm about half and half. I'm right in the middle of that spectrum.
Nice to know that you borrow from both worlds.
I really do. Yeah.
I imagine it's also rewarding to get to see these books relive and get back out there and to have a series like this that is gaining attention.
Yeah, it is nice. Like they originally rolled out between 2010 and 2016 with a publisher here in Canada who is a well-known children's publisher who were trying to get into graphic novels, as a lot of publishers were at that time. And they did fine here. They're reasonably well known here. I don't know how, don't get too much of a sense of how well known they are outside of Canada, but yeah, it's kind of nice for them to be having this second life. Like I definitely feel like they didn't get out there as far as I would have liked, and they went out of print, and for years I've been getting a couple of emails a week from people saying like, where do I find the Three Thieves books? And I didn't know what to tell them, but now I know what to tell them thanks to my friends at Paper Cuts. Yeah, the new editions are great. It's been really fun. We got to do new cover art. It's really fun to draw these characters again. I'm drawing 7 new covers. I love this new design. They look way better than the old books did. There's a bunch of you get a bunch of cool like making of stuff
Nice.
in the back. There's like a little sketchbook section and a little interview with me about the books. And so, yeah, even if you're somebody who read the books in their original versions, there's definitely all that cool back matter to dive into with the new versions. And if you're someone who's coming to them for the first time, you're sort of already getting like the best version, that's out there. So, a little something for everybody. But yes, it's been so satisfying for me to see this happening.
Anything that you would like to add in here and say about working with Mad Cave, working with the creative team, any of that that fits?
Boy, Mad Cave has been great so far to work with. Um, yeah, I don't know, like I don't want to sound like I'm just buttering their bread, but because they sign my paychecks. But um, yeah, they've been wonderful to work with so far. No complaints. And in terms of marketing, like there's, they've really been, like a lot of authors. I know you talk to a lot of creators who, often the complaint is, boy, the publisher's not doing enough to, kind of push my work. But they've got a whole team there who are like super professional and yeah, really, like aggressively marketing these books, which is nice to see. Because, like I say, the original publisher maybe, wasn't the best on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as a final official question, and we can, of course, add anything that you'd like, uh, where can people go to find these magnificent goods? Where can they go to check out more about you, more about the books?
Yeah, the books should be available anywhere you buy books or comics, which is good news. You can find me online. My website is scottchantler.com, easy to remember. I've recently started, like kind of like 20 years ago, like putting like a blog slash newsletter on my website that people can come and because social media seems like it's a bit up in the air these days in terms of what we're using or what's responsible to use, and maybe are we just not using anything anymore? I decided to make my website just a place where you can definitely always find me and get news about what I'm working on. So yeah, scottchandler.com. Go. You can kind of read the blog, sign up to get it to your email, all that stuff. At the very least, the only social media I'm still actively using is Instagram. I'm at Scott Chantler on Instagram. I'm kind of on Blue Sky, but I'm not sure for how long. I'm kind of iffy on Blue Sky, but yeah, my website and Instagram are 2 places where you can fairly reliably find me.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, many thanks for the chat. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to include on the interview?
I don't think so. I think yeah, it was a good chat.
Yeah, always good to talk, and absolutely glad to talk around book three and any other projects, any other things that come along.
Yeah. I got a couple of new books in the works. They're big. I can't really talk about them yet, but there's certainly stuff happening here behind the scenes. So, but yeah, we will definitely talk about book three in October.